Let me ask you a series of nerdy questions. Did you know Superman is autistic? The Flash is hyperactive and inattentive. Spider Man has an anxiety disorder. The X Men characters suffer from PTSD and depression? What if I told you they were all of these things? And the avatars of Stoic philosophy's virtues. Superman is from another planet. He's sensitive to specific materials and noise. His alter ego, newspaper reporter Clark Kent, is socially awkward. Superman and Clark Kent work for justice for people less fortunate than him, which is every human. Like Clark, I'm high-functioning autistic, which is also known as Asperger's syndrome or level 1 autism spectrum disorder. So I make sure it's my purpose in my work to be fair and objective while writing the story of my progress and the people I work with. Spider-Man is a teenager. He cracks jokes, runs his mouth, and won't shut up, whether he's in a fight with Dr. Octopus or struggling to make it to school on time. Like him, I talk a lot of shit when I'm annoyed, frustrated, and anxious. His coping mechanism is diarrhea of the mouth. But he overcomes all of that because he's the kind of person who never gives up. That takes courage. The Flash moves so fast that the world around him slows down, but he also runs into the trouble without thinking. He has self-control. He knows that he could hurt someone if he moves too fast. I can be quick to judgment like the Flash, but when I control myself, I make connections to things that no one has talked about. For example, the X-Men gave me the gift of being on a spectrum of abilities and a love of knowledge or wisdom. You have Wolverine, who reacts on animal instinct and gets angry quickly. But he's taken in by Professor Charles Xavier, a telepath who can control people's minds. Charles Xavier may be a Stoic's worst nightmare, but he is the fictional equivalent of Epictetus, and specifically the dichotomy of control. There are some things in my control and some things not in my control. Modern Stoic William Irvine writes in A Guide to the Good Life that what Epictetus means is a trichotomy of control. There are some things I have total control over, some control, and no control. I don't have control over being born with high-functioning autism that wasn't even on the DSM. I wasn't a behavioral problem in school, so I was passed over for ADHD testing. And so I slipped through the cracks until I was 38. But I have some control over the resulting symptoms of anxiety and depression. And I have total control over my character. In that moment of diagnosis, the universe gave me my intentional implementation, which I call the Adirondack aphorism. There's no such thing as bad weather, just bad gear and bad attitudes. This saying comes from my hometown of Lake Placid, New York. It means that I have no control over the weather, just like I have no control over the wiring in my brain. But I have some control over the gear I use to handle that weather. For that, I turn to my inner citadel, reading and writing, and my home, which I miss every day. For that, Donald Robertson writes about cognitive distancing and how to think like a Roman emperor. When I write down the thoughts that attack me and my life leading to isolation and no outlet, I turn those thoughts into a practical outlet that I have total control over. On the page, I can edit, recast, rewrite, or tear out the pages containing those value judgments and throw them out. There's the weather, gear to handle that weather, and attitudes to solve problems. So think about your ages, or your sages, or role models. Mine are fictional. Another modern Stoic writer, Massimo Pigliucci, writes, "It helps to have an intentional implementation." My Adirondack aphorism is a symbolic statement of the Stoic disciplines of desire, action, and assent. Third, develop your own inner citadel or special interest, a place or saying you can go to hyper-focus and to remind yourself of what it means to be yourself in a world you're not in control of and wasn't made for you. To quote Brittany Palat, to think clearly, act wisely, and deal with things outside of your control. For me, that's always having a pocket notebook to take me out of my swirling emotions in my head and practice other mindfulness techniques. I practice Stoicism because the best story I'll ever write is the one about a neurodivergent dad who helped his kids live a life of self-control, courage, fairness, and wisdom, and live in accordance with their nature.